Okay. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Looks like a lovely day where you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't complain. Just outside Philadelphia, the weather's lovely.
Yeah, you got a nice backyard. And you got a book. And your book is called Wild Happy. This sounds like an interesting story. So you were basically a professional kind of guy and then just decided to disappear into the Amazon jungle?
The timing's a little, some of the exploration happened actually a while ago. So this is actually a tale of a memoir back from when I was 24. Got lost in the jungle, but kind of have applied these lessons all the way through, including obviously the corporate and scientific world.
Okay, so you were in your 20s. So were you in college and then what made you decide just to jump ship?
Well, so what I thought is, I had thought I wanted to be a doctor. That didn't pan out for a variety of reasons. And then I realized going into the research behind medicine was really what I wanted to do. And then to take that a level further, it was, I want to go study how people study medicines, how they use plants as medicines in the most remote corners of the world. And so, yeah, finding the most remote jungle I could find led me to a tiny island in the outskirts of Papua New Guinea.
Oh, I see. So there was some research behind this. This
Yeah,
wasn't
for
this
sure.
wasn't to somebody who had a crisis of conscience that just wanted to disappear out of the face of the earth, right?
Right, right. You're exactly right. And I know those stories exist, but no, this wasn't like I was a corporate lawyer for 20 years and just couldn't take it and went and disappeared. No, it was actually kind of the opposite, where I sort of started a lot of my journey there, took away these lessons. But again, since I was so focused on the research, I was so driven on just getting things done, getting my work done, and getting out of there, even though there were a lot of challenges to get that done. But then it was kind of years later where I realized there were so many of these lessons that kind of seeped in from that experience. And since I had been so focused on my research at the time, I kind of missed. And it wasn't until friends and family over the years sort of said, had kind of made comments and things about how I sort of seemed to have a different take. And there was sort of this aha moment where it's like, you know what, this is all based on the fact that I had stumbled on this very rare little society on this island where, in so many ways, I mean, they kind of had it figured out. They had sort of this secret to happiness and contentment in this simple little life. And I had been kind of trying to borrow those lessons as much as possible to live my life here in the U.S. And that's what sort of culminated in, I guess I should write this up and tell the story.
How did you find that place?
So literally the objective was to find people pretty removed from society, as much as possible. My advisor, so this is all part of my PhD, and so my PhD advisor wanted me to go to Cambodia because he was doing work in Vietnam and Laos, and I was fine with that. That sounded great, certainly very removed, until I found out I had read a statistic that at the time about 5,000 people were still dying every year because of landmines left over from the Khmer Rouge.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I could deal with spiders and diseases and snakes and all that, but landmines was not something I was willing to deal with. So then it was, sort of opened up the whole world because he said, okay, well, if you don't want my choice, what's your choice? And I just literally looked up where the most removed people in the world. And so I went to Papua New Guinea and then chose their furthest, most remote, most isolated province within the country of Papua New Guinea.
So did you live amongst the natives? Did you go native, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I put up a little bit of a fight, but since the fact that my research was based on talking to the natives, learning from them what plants they used as medicines, it was only going to work if I really sort of let myself be, kind of become more like them rather than, the alternative. So yeah, I definitely lived among them.
Where did you stay? Did you actually live with them in their huts or whatever?
Yep, a lot of times. So I actually ended up renting a house. I mean, that's a very official term. I found someone who sort of had a spare little home, and I was able to rent it in the little town on the island I was on. And then we'd travel around to lots of villages, and every time we would enter a village, I would bring rice and things as gifts, and they would always find some place for me, some little thatched hut or something that myself and another local guy that I became friends with, who traveled around with me, where we could stay.
Okay, I'm trying to get a picture in my mind and trying to paint a picture for the viewers of what this place entailed and what it looked like. So, were there cars? Were there motorbikes? Were there bicycles? Was there anything like that? Or did everyone walk? Were people dressed, or were they running around naked?
It's a great question. So where I was, there was kind of a variety. It's a very small island, and on the island there was one small town. I mean, really small town. Had a couple little stores that were actually, concrete cinder block homes, but most of the town was actually a big open air concrete market that had like a little thatched roof over the whole thing, where they would sit down and sort of barter and sell everything from dried tobacco leaves to different smoked fish and things like that. The people generally wore clothes, typically had about, one, maybe two outfits. So very worn, but that was sort of the opinion there was sort of, you had your clothes, your set of clothes, and that's just what you wore. Maybe you had another set so that when you washed a set, it was there. Most men wore shorts and nothing else, sometimes flip-flops. They had some cars on the island, though most of the time, mostly people walked and traveled by boat. Little 25-foot or 40-foot fiberglass banana boats with a little 25 horsepower motor, because generally all of the villages are either scattered around the outside of the island or in the interior. If it was the interior, yeah, you pretty much just walked. And if it was the outside, some of the coastal villages around the coast, they're little thatched huts built on stilts right over the water, with dugout canoes and outriggers. So yeah, sort of a weird blend of definitely some modernity and as far as clothing and occasional cars and stuff like that. But a lot, you didn't have to go far, and that was completely gone. And it was just people in little thatched villages in the jungle.
Was there electricity?
There was some electricity in the town. There was no electricity in the villages. Occasionally there would be a little health outpost or a school, and it might have a little gas generator that they would use pretty much only in emergencies, because they didn't really rely on electricity. A lot of kerosene, and cooking over the fire, obviously, all the time. But in the town, there was mostly electricity, though the power was always going out. It wasn't a very reliable system.
Were you the only white guy in this town?
So occasionally I would run into some Australians. Australia and Papua New Guinea have a relationship of aid, and so there's a lot of Australian aid given to Papua New Guinea, and occasionally these Australians would come to the island, and I was certainly the only American. And when it came to the Australians, it was really interesting, because actually the locals don't really like the Australians very much. I mean, their opinion of it is sort of, yes, we get aid from the Australian government, but then they sort of steal and take anything of value to leave us handicapped and basically desperate for their aid. I'm not commenting on that. I just know that that's what they thought. So actually one of the quickest hurdles I got over was the fact that people saw white skin. They assumed I was just another Australian person there, in their opinions, to just sort of, take something or be corrupt or something. And when they hear my American accent, they would immediately lighten up and wanted to know, what brought me there and why I was there. And then, of course, once I would share that I was actually there to learn from them, well, then they really opened up. Then they were so proud and excited to have me and host me and invite me places and things. So it was a really good experience.
Was this the same place that David Rockefeller allegedly got eaten?
Yeah, it was actually, so it was his son, Michael Rockefeller.
Oh, Michael, okay.
It's a different part of Papua New Guinea, but a very similar cultural heritage, for sure.
Okay, so there was no threat of them having you for dinner.
Well, so it was interesting. I actually talk about this in the book, about the fact that when I went, and the year I went, it was 2003. And from at that point, the internet was still, fairly young, and cases of cannibalism really hadn't shown up since like the 70s. So it was something that happened back in the day, and it was nothing that I was worried about. And I spoke to some people, and especially some of the elders, they would joke about, oh yeah, I've had human, no big deal. And you never really knew if they were kind of messing with you or if that was really the case. And it wasn't until actually I came back and even in researching the book, there was a journalist put out a great book called Savage Harvest on the Michael Rockefeller story and on how, it really was probably cannibalism, despite the Rockefeller family really not liking that being the story. But that happened in the 60s, and his book didn't even come out until I think 2012. And then there were some other cases of cannibalism that happened in years since. And so I guess I kind of hit it at this perfect time to be completely ignorant and think, oh, cannibalism is ancient history, and then actually come back and realize, nope, not really. Some of it's still happening.
So how long were you there? How long did you live there?
I was there about 6 months.
6 months, okay. And just what was your takeaway? I know you did research, and I don't want to get into a lot of specifics of what plants cure what ailments, but what was your general takeaway?
What I found and what really inspired the book, and kind of exactly to your point, even as the scientist, the plants and the research honestly ended up being such a side note versus when I sort of really accepted, after I got past so much frustration of things just not working out. I was trying to be productive, trying to be efficient, because this is what I felt like was holding up, my entire future. So I had to get this work done. But really, hindsight and taking it all in was at some point realizing that these people really did have it figured out. I mean, that generally across the entire island, these are just the happiest people I have ever experienced. I mean, just wide smiles all the time, everyone happy, because they just had these simple lives. They weren't worried about achievement and success and any kind of fame or even wealth or anything like that. Their system on the island was so well balanced with nature, in that if they wanted to go fish, they enjoyed fishing, they would go out, easily catch enough fish in a couple hours to feed not only their family, but the entire village. If they wanted to go get fruits or vegetables, they went into the jungle and picked things, again, without any effort really, to be able to feed the entire village. So everyone gets very generous because it's all so easy. And then they spend their time just with friends and family and enjoying themselves, and without having to worry about the sort of things that we get caught up in here. So I think this was a big thing that I've sort of carried with me for a long time, and in the book, kind of really getting to put that into words of what those lessons were was by far the most valuable thing that I stumbled upon.
There is something to be said for that, and I've done a bit of traveling myself. I lived in Thailand for 3 years teaching English, and it was the same thing there. Maybe not to the degree that you did, because I rented a house that had electricity and air conditioning and television, but just the way that people worked at the university. It wasn't, nobody cared about what we would consume ourselves with here. It was just, okay, we come, we show up, we do our thing. And there was always time at the end of the day for conversation, for going out, there was none of this, I got to get home and finish this thing or do this work. Once work was done, it's done. And I think they had a much better idea with that. I learned a lot more than my students did, I'm sure, in the 3 years, And I came back to the United States with a different mindset, different perspective, yeah? Likewise, I'm sure you did. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, obviously I don't think that their way was perfect, and we do live in a different world, but I do think that we'd probably all be better off if we incorporated more of that into our lives, and so many people that I think are just kind of lost. It's so easy to get pulled in, it's this vacuum sucking us into more work and longer hours and wanting more money to buy more things, and the old story versus just taking that step back, whether it's traveling to get that perspective or reading a book just to kind of open your mind to that perspective. Either way, taking that step back to say what's really important.
Well, Ryan, we do have to wrap this up. We are out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Absolutely. It's wild-happy.com. And the book Wild Happy can be found anywhere books are sold, basically, online in stores, but obviously on Amazon and the rest. So.
Okay. How long has the book been out?
It just came out this summer. We're coming up on about 2 months right now that it's been out.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. Very interesting story. Best of luck